The invitation arrived on a Tuesday, a day Marcus Holt considered deeply stupid for receiving life-altering news. It sat on his kitchen table next to a lukewarm coffee mug and an unpaid water heater bill. It was printed not on paper, but on something thinner, cooler, and faintly violet, and it didn't bend at all when he picked it up. He read it once, then again, then finished his cold coffee and read it a third time, because the first two attempts hadn't made it any more coherent. The Galactic Consortium of Peaceful Worlds had officially invited one human, Marcus Holt, a former soldier, currently unemployed, owner of one broken water heater and a truck with a cracked windshield, to visit their great summit on a station called Serenity's Gate. The reason lay in the fine print, couched in polite but clumsy phrasing, but the meaning was clear enough. The consortium's Committee for Social Integration had voted to include a representative biological curiosity from the assassin world designated Sol 3 for educational and cultural observation purposes. He was the punchline. He understood that immediately. Sultry, that was what the rest of the galaxy called Earth, when they deigned to call it anything at all. Most didn't. Most categorized it in the same bracket as a minefield or an active volcano. Something you marked on your maps, something you stayed away from, something you didn't touch unless you'd made a catastrophic decision. Class 9. Assassin World. The designation meant the planetary environment was so hostile, so overloaded with predators, extreme weather, and geological aggression that for most species, survival seemed bordering on the impossible. The fact that the humans not only survived there but built cities, wrote books, and launched themselves into space was to the rest of the galaxy a cross between impressive and deeply unsettling. The fact that 43 of these species decided to invite one of these somethings to their most important annual gathering as a novelty told Marcus everything he needed to know about how they viewed him. He looked at the water heater bill. "Fine," he said. Serenity's Gate was beautiful, as things built by those who had never known fear are beautiful. It was immense, white and gold, curved into long, flowing arcs without a single sharp edge, built as if they had never heard of corners. The station sat in orbit above a pale green gas giant, catching the light of a distant sun, gleaming like jewelry left on dark velvet. The docking corridors were wide and softly lit. The air inside smelled of something sweet and clean, like a flower from a world where nothing ever needed thorns. Marcus walked through them with his bag over his shoulder and his hands in his pockets. The stairs began before he had even cleared the docking bay. He was used to being looked at the way tall people are used to their height, with awareness, but without surprise. A muffled knowledge that you occupy more visual space than average. But these stairs were different. They had a specific quality, like people watching an animal in a zoo walking toward its enclosure. The first alien he met in the main corridor was a Torellian. He had studied the species profiles during the 2-week transit from Earth because he was the type who liked to study things. 7 feet tall, pale blue, long limbs, narrow torso, 4 large, glowing eyes, the color of sea glass. It stopped completely when it saw Marcus, freezing in the middle of the corridor, staring. Marcus nodded at it. The Torellian made a sound like a small engine failing. Marcus kept walking. The second group was a cluster of Filiari, short, round, covered in something between fur and fine feathers, traveling in a group of 6. They stopped in unison and whispered in a language that Chip, the translator in Marcus's ear, rendered as a series of soft clicks, then gave up on. One of them pointed at Marcus with a limb that had 4 elbows. Marcus nodded at that, too. He found his apartment without assistance, using a map he had downloaded before docking. The room was larger than his entire apartment back home. The bed was circular, covered in blankets made of something so soft he lacked the words to describe the texture. The lighting adjusted automatically when he entered, switching to a warmer hue, which was either thoughtful or unsettling. He sat on the bed and took out 3 things. A thermos of coffee he had brewed before boarding, because he didn't trust alien hospitality regarding anything drinkable. A battered paperback, a novel he had already read twice, and a small multi-tool that had belonged to his father and had spent 11 years in his pocket through 2 deployments, 1 war, and 1 thing he didn't like to think about. He looked at the ceiling. It held small lights arranged in patterns, alien constellations, likely holding meaning for someone. He drank his coffee, read his book, and went to sleep at 21. As always, the great summit opened in a hall that could have contained the 3 largest buildings Marcus had ever been in. He sat at his assigned desk, a small one near the back, noticeably less sophisticated than every other desk in the room, positioned to make it clear, you are not a guest of honor. You are not even a guest of interest. You are a guest for entertainment. He sat, placed his notebook on the table, clicked his pen, and listened. He was very good at listening. It was something the military had hammered into him, and then something harsher than the military had finished off. You learn to be silent. You learn to sit still and let the information come to you. You know that the difference between understanding a situation and missing it entirely is usually about 45 seconds of attention instead of talking. The proceedings were transmitted through a chip clipped behind his ear, provided by the consortium, handed to him by an aide who held the small case with 2 fingers, and then stepped back 2 paces. That is how you offer food to something you are unsure of. He attached it and listened. Generally, the consortium was discussing trade routes, new membership applications, and the expansion of something called the Peaceful Corridor, a stretch of space officially designated as conflict-free and under collective protection. 2 existing agreements required revision. It was the most significant political gathering in the known galaxy. It was also a very long meeting with very long speeches, and Marcus had sat through his share of those. He was on the 4th page of his notes when the alien next to him spoke. You are making notes, yet you ask no questions. It was an observation delivered in the tone of a person who had seen a parrot count to 3. The alien's name card read, Vexrelian, one of the founding species of the consortium, pale gold, with long fingers and an expression forever frozen in a slight smirk. Vex had the air of someone who considered everything around him slightly beneath his full attention, which Marcus had learned was a specific type of arrogance inherent in all species. Yes, Marcus said. We did not expect that, Vex said. What did you expect? Vex tilted his head. The 3 lids on his left eye rotated independently. Confusion, perhaps. Disorientation. The orientation materials were quite complex. I read them during the flight, Marcus said. All of them. Vex looked at him the way you look at a machine you didn't expect to turn on. I am also house-trained, Marcus added, just in case that was the next question. The 3 lids repeated the sequence, this time faster. It was, Marcus decided, a Vexrelian laugh. You have a sense of humor? Vex said. We have a lot of things, Marcus replied and returned to his notes. The joke unfolded in pieces over the next few hours, as it always does when you are the punchline. Several delegates at the refreshment zone watched him eat, whispering in voices the translator still picked up something about whether a mortal would properly use utensils, something about the wisdom of giving him access to anything sharp. A junior aide who handed him a schedule of events froze, watching his hands the whole time, like one watches a dog that hasn't bitten anyone yet. A note in the summit's general feed, redirected to his channel either by accident or as a very subtle joke, described his presence as a light addition to ensure biological diversity and novelty to standard procedures. He read the note, placed his communicator on the table, and looked at the gas giant outside the nearest observation window. Its atmosphere churned in slow, massive bands of green and white. He wasn't angry. He had already been the punchline many times. He knew what to do with that. Nothing visible. You fold it into a cold place and you keep moving and observing, because the people who laugh at you are also inadvertently telling you everything about themselves. He was observing when he noticed the wall. He almost missed it. He was taking the long way back from the refreshment zone, past an external observation corridor that offered the best view of the gas giant. The wall at intersection 7 stopped him. It looked normal, white, smooth, seamless, like everything else on the station, but it had a line, nearly invisible unless the light hit it at just the right angle. The light caught it for 1 second as he passed, and he stopped. The seam was straight. Everything on Serenity's gate was curved. The design was consistent, almost obsessive. Every joint, every panel, every surface followed the same arc. The architects of the consortium, whoever they were, did not make straight lines. This seam was straight, precise, intentional. He placed his hand against the wall casually, as if just leaning. The wall was warm, not station warm, not the temperature of a climate-controlled room. Something behind the wall was generating heat. Something with a power source. He pulled his hand away, continued walking, returned to his desk, sat down, and looked at his notes. He wrote, Intersection 7, wrong seam, wrong heat. Check at night. He looked up at the hall, at the 43 species in their finest clothes, giving speeches, signing agreements, feeling the distinct security of people who had never had to wonder if the walls around them were what they appeared to be. He looked at a wall visible from his desk, intersection 4, and found another seam. He snorted and wrote that down too. That night, in the long silence of the station's dark cycle, Marcus walked the outer corridors alone. He told no one. There was no one to tell. He was the joke, the curiosity, the death man from the end of the hall. No one was listening to him, and no one was about to start listening just because he politely asked. So he walked. He had his multi-tool, his thermos, and his attentiveness, a calm, unhurried, steady thing he had always been best at. He found 6 seams in 4 corridors. 2 of them turned out to be warm. At one of them, when he ran the edge of his multi-tool along the base, he found a gap a millimeter wide, almost nothing. And through that gap came air colder than the station's climate control. Cold, recycled, alien breath. He crouched there in the empty corridor for a moment very quietly. He listened. Vibration. Very faint, rhythmic, not mechanical. The rhythm a living creature makes when it is trying very hard not to make a sound, but its body gives it away. Something was behind the wall. Something alive. Something that was hiding. He stood, tucked the tool back into his pocket. He walked back to his apartment slowly and steadily, not looking back, not changing his pace, the way he had been taught to move when information is critical. The worst thing you can do is let anyone know you have the information. He sat on the soft, circular bed, looked at the alien stars on the ceiling, thought about the warm walls and the hidden seams and the gap where the breath was. He thought about the 43 species who had been peaceful for so long they had forgotten what it was like to have something waiting for them. He made a list. Every seam, every location, every temperature, everything he had seen. The storm behind the gas giant churned in massive, silent, patient waves, something that had been building for centuries and hadn't yet decided it was finished. Marcus didn't sleep. He planned. Morning on the station arrived with a slow warming. The light in every corridor grew brighter over 20 minutes, like a sunrise on a world with weather. Marcus had been awake since 4. He showered, ate from his own supplies. He still hadn't touched the station food, not out of fear, but out of habit. You eat what you know when you are working. He spent 2 hours organizing his notes until the list was sorted by location, temperature variation, and proximity to load-bearing structures. He had 12 entries, 12 wrong seams on a station that, as far as the consortium was aware, had been checked, certified, and declared safe by a team of 38 specialists before the summit began. He thought about the 38 specialists and what they had been taught to look for: advanced reconnaissance, weapons, communication, interception, complex threats used by complex enemies against complex targets. He thought about what they hadn't been taught to look for, because it never occurred to anyone to look. Bodies, living beings, pressed against the wrong side of the walls, breathing shallowly and waiting. The question was what they were waiting for. The second day of the summit had a different schedule. Small working groups, bilateral meetings, a cultural exhibition in the afternoon where different species shared art, food, and music from their home worlds. Marcus attended everything. He wasn't invited to the working groups, of course, and he didn't participate in any bilateral meetings, but he was admitted to the exhibition hall because you can't have a cultural curiosity and then not show it off. He walked through the hall at the speed of someone looking at art, but actually watching the doors, the movement of the crowd, and the behavior of the station's small security detail. 6 consortium officers in pale blue uniforms patrolled in pairs, spending most of their time near the snack tables, looking relaxed. He was watching one of the guard pairs when someone spoke beside him. "You have been out in these corridors since dawn." He turned. The alien standing next to him was small, about 3.5, maybe 4 feet tall, narrowly built, with 4 arms and a face on which too many expressions changed simultaneously, which, as he had learned from his research, was a hallmark of the Vithani. The Vithani processed emotions physically, quickly in the structure of their faces. They controlled and hid them. The one standing next to him was currently cycling through curiosity, caution, and that specific look that appears on someone watching another person do something interesting and no longer able to refrain from commenting. Her name tag, attached to what passed for formal wear among the Vithani, read Zara. "I'm a morning person," Marcus said. "You were not walking for exercise," she said, not accusing, just stating. He looked at her for a moment. In 2 of her 4 hands was a small data pad, in the third a stylus. The fourth held something resembling a cup of warm liquid. An investigator, he thought. Someone who pays attention. Someone who was paying attention to me. "What is your field?" he asked. "Biological observation," she said. "I have been assigned to document your visit." "Document me?" "Yes." She didn't look embarrassed. He respected that. I have 17 pages of notes. I have 12, he said. Want to compare? She tilted her head. 4 expressions ran across her face in turn. Surprise, interest, reappraisal, and something warmer, for which there was no human name. What are your notes about? He looked around the exhibition hall at the pale blue security officers by the snack tables, at the cluster of delegates moving from stand to stand without a care, unhurried, confident in their safety the way people are confident in things that have never failed them. Walls, he said. He told her about intersection 7 in the corner of the exhibition hall behind a display of Cerulean musical sculptures that made sounds too high for human hearing, standing close and speaking quietly because the music covered their voices. He showed her his list. She read it twice with one eye while the other 2 watched the room. What he noted, good instincts, even if she didn't know why she had them. These could be structural anomalies, she said, finishing. They are all on a station that passed a security inspection 48 hours ago. She looked at him. What do you think? I think it's in the walls, he said. I think it has been there since the summit began. I think it is alive and it is waiting. And none of the security staff know about it because none of the security staff were trained to touch a wall and check if it's breathing. Zara remained silent. Her face changed 6 or 7 expressions quickly. That is a serious claim, she said. Yes. If you take this to the Consortium Council, they will laugh at you, Marcus said. Yes, I know. She looked at him directly. Why then are you telling me? He thought, because you are the only one on this station who has been watching me closely. Enough to notice I was on my feet before dawn. That means you notice things. I need someone who notices things. She paused again, then said, Show me intersection 7. She stood at intersection 7, pressing both hands to the wall and closing her eyes. Marcus watched as her face became very still in that specific way. Vathani faces became still when they weren't acting but actually experiencing something. It's warm, she said, and the seam does not correspond to any other seam on this level. I checked the building schematics in the station's public archive yesterday evening. She opened her eyes, looked at the seam, then looked at him. How did you know what to look for? Marcus thought about how to answer. He thought about the world that created him. Gravity that was slightly higher than anywhere else in the known galaxy. Predators that had spent 65 million years perfecting themselves. Weather systems that could wipe out a coastline in half a day. He thought about 3 million years of human evolution in conditions that made the home worlds of most other species look like resorts. Where I come from, he said, you learn to check what's in the walls, because there's usually something there. She looked at him for a long time. Her face did something the translator chip tried to convey as recalibration. He thought that was probably correct. We should go to security, she said. I agree. They won't believe you. I know, Marcus said. But they will believe you. You are an official representative. You have the authority. You have 17 pages of research notes. He looked at her. Tell them it is your observation. I will back you up. She tilted her head. You would let someone else take the credit? I don't care who gets the credit, he said. I care that it's in the walls. The head of security on Serenity's gate was a Tyrellian named Commander Ole, 7 feet of pale blue authority who had run the station's security for 11 years without incident, which meant he had developed the specific professional confidence of a man who had never had to be wrong. He listened to Zara's report. His 4 glowing eyes were focused above her head at a mid-range distance, the classic posture of someone who has already decided what he thinks before the information has fully arrived. The station passed a full security sweep 2 days ago, he said when she finished. Yes, Zara said, but it was conducted by certified specialists, Ole said. I understand, but if we could... The death man touched some walls and said they were warm, Ole said. He looked at Marcus for the first time. The gaze was exactly the one Marcus had been receiving since his arrival. Part curiosity, part condescension, part the general caution of someone who doesn't know if you are an idiot or dangerous and hopes you are just an idiot. Thermal anomalies are measurable, Marcus said. You don't have to take my word for it. Check the sensors yourself. We conducted a full scan with internal and external sensors. Ole paused for half a second, less than a blink, but Marcus caught it. Internal ones. Ole, Marcus said, the station is shielded from the inside. Anything that was in the wall space before the sensors were calibrated, the wall space is inaccessible from inside the station. From the inside? No, Marcus said. From the outer shell. The pause this time was longer. Ole's 4 eyes shifted slightly. A micro-movement that meant something was scrolling through a mind that wasn't used to scrolling things. The outer shell is controlled by automatic systems, Ole said, but the confidence in his voice dropped a registered degree. Automatic systems that were programmed when? Marcus asked. And last calibrated when? And calibrated to detect exactly what? Ole looked at him. Something in the four glowing eyes shifted from condescending to calculating. You are suggesting, Ole said slowly, that something entered the wall space from outside the shell before the summit lockdown and has been in the walls since. I am suggesting you should check, Marcus said. That's it. Perform an external thermal scan of the intersections from my list. If I'm wrong, nothing is lost but 20 minutes. And if you're right, Marcus said, we have very little time. Ole performed the scan. He performed it quietly, without broadcasting it to the summit. And Marcus stood at the security post with Zara beside him, watching the thermal image visualize the outer wall structures of corridors 2, 4, and 7 in false color gradients. The results came in after 11 minutes. The security post became very quiet. 16 thermal signatures. Not 12, he had missed 4. They were in the walls along the station's outer ring. Arranged, Marcus now saw with icy clarity and the exact pattern you would use if you wanted to move to all the station's main intersections simultaneously. Not observation, not positioning for reconnaissance, positioning for an attack. What is that? Zara whispered. No one answered immediately. The thermal signatures were dense, warm-blooded or equivalent, and their shape, even compressed and squeezed into the wall space, suggested something large, larger than a Tyrellian, larger than most present in the summit hall. Ole stood with his hands at his sides, absolutely still, staring at the screen, his professional confidence gone. In its place appeared something Marcus recognized from an entirely different context. The face of a man who has just realized the situation was never what he thought it was. We don't know. We have never seen this, Ole said. Marcus looked at the positions, looked at the corridors, looked at the summit hall marked in the center of the map. They are waiting for the order, Marcus said, and when it comes, they will be in the main hall in less than 3 minutes. Zara made a sound for which he had no translation. Ole turned to his team. He began giving quiet, fast orders. Seal the summit hall exits. Evacuate the senior delegates without explanation. Do not cause panic. His team moved quickly. He was good at his job. Marcus decided he just had never been tested. Marcus looked at the thermal map. 16 signatures. All of them motionless. All of them patient. He thought about what kind of species climbs the outside of a space station to hide in its walls. Thought about what kind of mission requires 16 of them. Thought about the 43 peaceful species in the summit hall. None of them were built for what was in those walls. None of them. Who was this ever for? He shoved his hand in his pocket, found the multi-tool, flipped it once. Twice. The battered metal was familiar, the way it calmed him. They came here thinking of soft targets, he thought. They know I am here, he thought. Good. The order came through 40 minutes later. Marcus was at the security post, helping Ole map out evacuation routes when the thermal image lit up like a game board that someone had kicked. All 16 signatures moved simultaneously in sync, coordinated. Not scouts, Ole said. An assault team. It was a sentence he was clearly uttering for the first time in his career because it came out with a hint of total disbelief. The sound of a man watching a word he thought was theoretical become real. They are moving, Marcus said, already at the door. How many delegates are left in the main hall? 63. We couldn't evacuate them without. How many of your security staff are armed? All 6 officers carry shockers and gear that stop something large. Ole looked at him. The station is not a military facility. We are a peaceful station, aren't we? With 16 large creatures in the walls moving toward your 63 delegates, Marcus said. He looked at the security officer. What do you have? What hits hard? A pause Marcus couldn't afford. Then Ole opened a second locker on the wall of the security post. And Marcus saw that in the locker were 6 shockers, 4 long-range emitters designed for crowd control, and 1 plasma cutter which was technically a maintenance tool and technically not a weapon, just as a hammer technically wasn't a weapon. Marcus took the plasma cutter, took one of the emitters, looked at Zara, who had followed him from the thermal screen and was standing in the doorway with her small 4-armed physique, datapad, and a face on which 12 emotions were changing per second. Stay here, he said. You cannot fight 16 of them alone, she said. I am not going to fight 16 of them at once, he said. That would be stupid. He ran out of the security post. The first wall panel exploded at the intersection of Corridor 4. Marcus was already in the corridor when it happened. He heard it before he saw it, a deep, tearing sound. metal yielding to pressure applied from the wrong side, and then the panel flew out in one piece, tossed aside the way one tosses aside something they respect. What came out was large. It was the first one. It was larger than anything of the alien species, larger than the Terrellians, built with a completely different philosophy. Thick, armored, with 4 legs and 2 primary upper limbs, and a head positioned low between massive shoulders. Its coloring was dark, somewhere between deep green and black, and the skin texture suggested something evolved on a world where being difficult to kill was the primary survival strategy. Its eyes found Marcus immediately. Small eyes, bright, intelligent. The second assessment was mutual and very fast. Marcus thought, predator, ambush specialist, used to fleeing targets. He thought, I will not flee. He fired the emitter. The creature took the hit to the upper torso and staggered. It really staggered, which told Marcus that the weapon had some effect, even if it didn't stop it, and then it lunged at him, fast. 4 legs gave it stability and acceleration that 2 didn't, and it covered the corridor distance between them in less than 2 seconds, which was fast enough to be genuinely impressive, and not fast enough to reach him before he shifted to the side to the wall and used the creature's own momentum to let it pass and bring the plasma cutter to the joint where its neck met the armored shoulder and fire at close range. The smell was terrible. The creature fell. Marcus moved. He didn't look at it anymore. You check your kill when there is time. And now there was no time, because the thermal map he had memorized showed 3 more signatures converging on intersection 4 and 2 more in a parallel corridor. And all of them would have heard the noise and adjusted. He climbed. The maintenance ladder for the station was exactly where the schematic said it was, recessed in the corridor wall, and he climbed it quickly. 3 steps at a time into the service passage that ran above the main corridor level, a passage the consortium security team had never had a reason to use, because the station had never been in a situation requiring ceiling combat. He scrambled through the service passage on all 4s, fast, silently, and exited through the next hatch, 20 meters ahead of where the 3 signatures were converging. He exited behind them. What happened over the next 6 minutes wasn't something Marcus thought about in real time. Thinking is for before and after. During, there was only movement and information and decisions that were made faster than thoughts, the thing that lives in the body below the mind. And it had been created for exactly this. Created on an assassin world for millions of years, created by everything that had ever tried and failed to kill the creatures that eventually became humans. He destroyed 2 more before they knew he was in the passage system. The 3rd knew, turned around fast, and it was strong. Stronger than him physically, like creatures built heavier are strong. And it grabbed him with both upper limbs before he fired the emitter straight into the soft tissue in its midsection, which was a lesson from the first one. Soft places were soft places, and it let go. He didn't get out of it clean. His left shoulder was twisted in a direction it wasn't intended for, and the pain was a specific, bright pain. Something that would require attention later, but wasn't his problem right now. He kept moving. In the summit hall, 63 delegates who hadn't been evacuated were learning about fear. It came through the walls on the south side of the hall, 2 panels simultaneously, loud enough to be felt in the chest. 2 creatures entered, and the hall, which had been a place of careful diplomatic negotiations for 2 days, became something entirely different in less than 4 seconds. The delegates ran. They ran the way creatures run that have never had to know where to run, clumping together, turning around, and hindering each other, screaming in 7 different languages simultaneously. 2 consortium security officers in the hall did exactly what they had been trained to do: stand between the threat and the delegates and activate their shockers. The shockers did almost nothing. 1 officer fell in the first 10 seconds. The other managed to stand longer and landed enough hits to slow the second creature. But slowing isn't stopping, and the panels vibrated along the eastern wall, and a sound was heard as something else broke through. Vex, whom Marcus had pegged on the first day as the most arrogant representative in any room he was in, pressed against the far wall of the hall, pressing his golden hands against the surface behind him, and his 3 eyes widened, and what was on his face was no longer a smirk. On his face was a pure and total realization that the world wasn't at all what he had thought it was. That was when the 3rd creature, breaking through the eastern wall, took a plasma cutter hit to the face from above. Everyone in the hall looked up. Marcus had dropped from the ceiling hatch, landed on the creature's back, and pinned it to the floor, and the hall fell into absolute silence for a very short time. There is a version of this moment that could have been triumphant. This was not the version that occurred. The version that occurred was that Marcus stood from the downed creature in the very middle of the summit hall with a plasma cutter in one hand and a shoulder that was sending very urgent signals up his spine. And he looked at the 63 delegates huddled against the walls, and at the downed security officer on the floor, and at the remaining consortium officer standing with a slumped shocker. His pale blue face was completely devoid of color, and he quickly calculated the signatures he still had to account for. 12 destroyed or incapacitated, 4 still unaccounted for. "Everyone, listen," he said. "Loud, level, without ornamentation. The translators will take care of the distribution. The other 4 are in the outer corridors. The exits on the north side of this hall are currently free. Move. Single file. Do not run. Walk fast. Keep low. Stay together." He looked at the real security officer. You lead them. Go." The officer looked at him, at the downed creature, at the plasma cutter. "You are the death man from the end of the hall." "Yes," Marcus said, "go." The delegates began to move. Vex, passing him, stopped for one moment. His 3 lids went through their cycle. He didn't say anything. Marcus didn't need him to say anything. The 4 remaining signatures came from the service passages when the main hall fell silent, attracted by the noise or following a preset schedule. Marcus couldn't know which, but they came, and the corridor outside the summit hall became the narrowest, worst place for something large and built like a weapon to fight something bipedal and half as light. This, as it turned out, was terrain that the bipedal, half-as-light thing knew how to use. The service corridors were narrow. 4 legs were a disadvantage in tight spaces. The advantage of mass and strength required space to maneuver. The creatures were built for open ground, for the type of combat where you can use your size, your speed, and your momentum. And Marcus had been trained in the exact, dirty, close, exhausting work that turned those advantages into disadvantages. He entered the corridor with a plasma cutter and the last charge in the shock emitter and the multi-tool his father had given him, which wasn't a weapon but was heavy and had a very sharp edge. And he didn't think about the 4 signatures as a number. He thought about them one at a time. The first came fast, filling the corridor from shoulder to shoulder, and Marcus pressed against the wall, let it commit to its inertia, and brought the plasma cutter to the base of its spine and fired. The second stopped when the first fell, which told him it was smart enough to recalibrate. Smart. That was good. Actually, smart meant it could be confused. He threw the empty shock emitter forward down the corridor, hard. The creature turned. He came out behind it. 1 down, 2 left. He was bleeding from his forearm. When the 5th was already downed, his dislocated shoulder sang a higher note. He took a glancing blow from a limb that felt like it was made of compressed concrete, and his ribs had an opinion about that. The 6th grabbed him properly, got hold of his jacket, lifted him, slammed him into the corridor wall so hard the panel behind his back cracked. He didn't lose the plasma cutter. He fired it upward at close range into the lower part of the creature's jaw, and it let him go. He landed, barely keeping his balance. He stood in the corridor with his back against the cracked wall, breathing hard. His shoulder, ribs, and forearm were sending simultaneous complaints, and the corridor was quiet now, the kind of silence that settles in a space after something violent has passed through it and ended. He looked at the last downed creature. He looked at his hand clutching the plasma cutter stable, as his father's hand had been. How do you learn to be stable on a world that gives you no other choice? He breathed. He gathered himself. He walked back to the summit hall, because there was still work there, and there was always work. And somewhere behind him, Zara's voice sounded over the station's command channel, then repeated, and he reached up and turned the channel on, saying, "I am free. Everyone, 6 corridors. Bring the medical team to the south exit. Second officer is wounded." A pause. Zara's voice, devoid of her professional observer distance, said, "Marcus, you are wounded." He looked at his hand, at the shoulder he wasn't using, at the general inventory of things requiring attention. "I am on my feet," he said. He continued walking. The medical team was Vithani. 3 of them, small and fast. With 4 arms and soft voices, they met him at the intersection of the south exit with a portable unit and said words that the chip translated as, "Please, stop walking for 30 seconds and your arm is causing concern. And how are you standing with that shoulder?" He sat on a crate someone had pulled from storage and let them work. Zara was there. She stood behind while the medics worked and held her datapad with 2 hands, not using it. Her face displayed a Vithani thing, quickly changing a sequence of things he had learned to partially read over the last 2 days. Relief, sharp and physical, alternating with something more complex that constantly repeated, returning between other expressions like a song stuck on a certain note. 4, he said. She looked at him. You confirmed 14, she said. We found the remaining 2 in the walls of the lower decks. They surrendered when they realized the attack had failed. She paused. They are larger than I expected. Most things are, Marcus said. One of the medics said something sharp in Vitani that the chip translated as, "Stop talking and hold still." He held still. Do you know what species this is? He asked Zara. She knew. He saw it by the way her face became cautious for a moment. It is the Keth, she said. He had never heard the word before, but the quality with which she pronounced it told him a specific compression of the voice, meaning a name that everyone in the room except him recognized. A name that carried a long history. Tell me, he said. Later, she said. When you stop bleeding. He accepted that. The 2 Keth who had surrendered were placed in a small station security cell that wasn't intended for this purpose and was doing its best. Ole kept them under arrest, using equipment originally designed for managing malfunctioning cargo transports, which was the closest available analog to something that could hold something of that size. Marcus stood outside the cell with a bandaged arm and a braced shoulder and a borrowed jacket that didn't quite fit because nothing on the station was tailored to his height, and he looked at the Keth through the viewing window. Up close, with the ability to observe them properly, they were impressive in that specific sense in which apex predators are impressive. Everything about them said they had evolved to be at the top of their food chain on a world that took that competition seriously. 4-legged stance, dense armored skin, low-set head with small, bright eyes, the way they held themselves even now, under arrest and with a failed mission, a peculiar, stubborn dignity that Marcus recognized. He recognized it because it was how he himself tried to hold himself. Ole appeared at his shoulder, which, given the difference in height, meant about at the level of his mid-back. You should be in the infirmary. I should talk to these 2, Marcus said. They hadn't spoken since their capture. They hadn't had the necessary conversation yet. Marcus looked at the Keth cell. Consortium investigators, when they arrive, we requested a full response team from the center. They will arrive in 19 hours. 19 hours is a long time, Marcus said. He went inside. The Keth looked at him the way they had in the corridor, with that fast, precise assessment that classified you as a threat or not a threat. He had seen it happen on the faces of those he had fought, and he watched it happen now on the faces of these 2, and watched what followed the thing he was counting on. Confusion, because he didn't fit. He was smaller than any of the others in the assault team. He wasn't built the way they were. He wasn't a Tyrellian, not a Cerillian, not one of the 43 species of the consortium. And he stood before them with a bandaged arm and a braced shoulder and had just incapacitated 14 of their team. And none of those facts added up to a framework they understood. He sat opposite them without a table, just on the floor of the security cell, because he wanted to be at their eye level, and he just said, You didn't know I was here. No answer, but the small, bright eyes moved. It was enough. The consortium didn't know I was going to do what I did either, he said. I don't think anyone did. Usually, that's how it happens. He looked at them levelly. Your operation was planned against a specific target. A station full of diplomatic staff who have never been in a fight. It was a well-planned plan. You positioned yourselves days in advance, avoided sensor scans, had a clear temporal target. He paused. It failed because of one variable no one accounted for. One human. The Keth cell translator chip processed it for a moment, then yielded, What are you? No species. What are you from, Earth? Sol, Marcus said. The one on your maps with the danger designation. A pause. Then the same Keth said, Assassin World. Yes. Another. Longer pause. You were invited as a joke. Yes, Marcus said. That, said the Keth, and the chip struggled to pronounce. An unfortunate coincidence for the plan. Yes, Marcus said. So it was. He hadn't come here to get intelligence. The consortium people would do that, or try to. He had come because he wanted to look at them and understand what they were trying to do. And now, sitting on the floor of a borrowed security cell while his shoulder pulsed, he thought he understood. They had come here to break the consortium, not to destroy the station. They could have done that from the outside. They came to enter the summit hall, in the middle of the most important gathering of peaceful species in the galaxy, and take hostages or worse. While these species were gathered in one room, they came to teach the 43 species a lesson about how thin the security they believed in was. It was a good plan against the right target. The right target. Everyone who was in that hall except one person invited as a joke. "Tell me who sent you," Marcus said. None of the Kethcell answered. "You don't have to," Marcus said. "I am not an investigator. The consortium team will arrive in 19 hours, and they will ask better questions than I." He stood. His shoulder clearly expressed its opinion. He moved toward the door, then stopped and looked back at them. "Whatever it was worth, your assault team fought well. They were disciplined and coordinated, and 3 of them almost got me." He said it straight, without bragging. "That means something." He left. The summit did not resume. The delegates who had been in the hall were in the infirmary or in their apartments or in small, shocked groups in the station's common areas, speaking in quiet voices or not speaking at all. That kind of silence that settles over a group of people who have just had their understanding of what is possible, what is real, how the world works, fundamentally rewritten. Marcus found a spot in the observation lounge next to the view of the gas giant and sat with a cup of station tea that proved to be barely drinkable. And he looked at the planet below and thought. Zara found him there an hour later. She climbed onto the seat next to him, which, given her height, took a small effort, and she sat with her cup of something warm and looked at the gas giant for a long time without saying a word. "The Keth Empire," she said finally. "They have been expanding for 40 years, slowly, carefully, territory by territory, always with a reason, always with some provocation they could point to." She paused. "The consortium has been negotiating with them for 6 years, trying to find terms." "Did it work?" Marcus said, already knowing the answer. "No, but we kept trying, because the alternative," she stopped. "The alternative required us to consider things we do not consider. Conflict, defense, weapons." She looked at him. "This is not what the consortium was prepared for." "We didn't have to be." "You did," Marcus said. "You just didn't know it yet." She looked at him for a moment. Then she said, "You will say this to the council when they reconvene." Marcus looked at the gas giant. The storm that had been slowly rotating below since his arrival had turned into something larger. A spiral the size of a small continent, white and complex, something that was doing exactly what it had always intended to do. And the only question was whether the people above were paying attention. "I will say it if asked," he said. "You will be asked," Zara said. He looked at her. "You are no longer a joke from the end of the room," she said simply. The council reconvened in a smaller chamber than the summit hall, with fewer delegates and most of that specific silence of people who had recently been frightened. Marcus sat at a desk that wasn't a small joke desk at the end. He sat next to Ol, who had spent the last few hours transforming from a surprised commander into a commander who was making sense of what that surprise meant for his career, his decisions, and his station, and who carried that sense-making in every line of his body. They heard a full report from security. Thermal scanning, corridor encounters, the conversation with the Keth in the security cell, 16 signatures, 15 that were stopped, and 2 under arrest. Then they looked at Marcus. He was tired. He was honest about that, at least with himself. Shoulder, arm, ribs, the specific fatigue that comes not just from physical effort, but from the steady, exhausting burden of responsibility for other people's lives in a situation where no one else does. He hadn't slept in 31 hours. He had coffee that was getting cold. He told them what he told the 2 Keth in the security cell. Not a personal conversation, but an assessment, the Keth's strategy, the intentions behind the attack, the reason a well-planned operation against the right targets had failed because of one variable no one accounted for. The Keth didn't account for a death man, he said. Not because they are unreasonable, but because no one told them who was here, and no one told them that because you invited me as a curiosity, as something to look at. He looked around the room. He wasn't angry. He was just stating clearly, "That is why I am still alive to lead this conversation, not because I am exceptional, but because I was underestimated by them and by you." The silence in the chamber was the kind that means the room is thinking. He continued, because there was more to say, and he was going to say it before his shoulder started aching even louder. "The Keth will know the operation failed. They will know why it failed. This gives you a window, a short one, while they recalibrate, and you can act." He looked at Ol. "The station's security protocol must be rebuilt from the primary assumption that a threat can come from anywhere, including those places where you never looked because you never had to." He looked back at the council. "And the consortium has another conversation to have about what comes next." Not a conversation about negotiations, but another one, the one you have been avoiding. Are you suggesting we prepare for war? One of the delegates said. I am suggesting you prepare for reality, Marcus said. The Keth were planning this whether you were ready or not. The only thing that changed today is that now you know. Vex was in the chamber. He hadn't said anything during the recount, which was unusual enough to notice. He watched Marcus with an expression Marcus couldn't read, and at the end of the silence that followed, he spoke. When the consortium decided to invite a human, Vex said cautiously and clearly, many of us felt it was not only unorthodox but unnecessary. A demonstration of openness without practical value. He stopped, looked at his long golden hands on the table. I voted in the majority. No one said anything. I was wrong, Vex said, and I would like to officially state that I said this. 3 seconds of silence followed. Then the council began to speak not in long speeches, but the kind that has real weight, the kind that happens when people stop defending their positions and begin trying to understand what the truth actually is. Marcus drank his cold coffee. It was, under all circumstances, the most successful meeting he had ever attended. The consortium's response team arrived in 1840, which was 19 minutes ahead of schedule, and told Marcus everything he needed to know about how seriously the central offices took the incident at Serenity's gate. They arrived on 3 ships. The first carried a reconnaissance and interrogation team, 20 staff, quiet and professional, with equipment that looked nothing like the borrowed station-holding facilities. The second carried a full engineering squad with orders to dismantle and rebuild the station's entire security infrastructure. The third carried 7 members of the consortium's High Council, including a representative from each founding species, who arrived with the weight of people who had flown very far, very fast, because something had happened that made distance irrelevant. Marcus watched the docking of the ships from the observation lounge, where he sat with Zara and his cold tea. Last night he had slept for 6 hours. His shoulder was under the observation of something the Vathani medics had given him that worked better than anything he had used before, which he made a note to ask about later. His arm was bandaged, ribs wrapped, and he had eaten a real lunch. The station food turned out to be fine. Actually, some of it was delicious. He looked and felt like a man who had spent 2 days finding hidden enemies and fighting them. He looked exactly as the upcoming meeting required. The High Council session lasted 4 hours. Marcus wasn't sure he would be included. He hadn't been sure about many things since receiving the invitation on Tuesday with the violet paper and the water heater bill, but he was in the room at a full table, this time at a seat that was the same size as everyone else's, and the 7 members of the High Council listened to everything: thermal scanning, corridor encounters, the conversation with the Keth in the security cell, and they asked careful, specific questions that told him these were people who, once they realized the situation was serious, could be serious. The main representative was a Terralian, distinguished from Ol as a senior executive by the fact that she had learned to arrange her 4 glowing eyes into readable calm instead of expressive reaction. Her name was Supreme Counselor Raishan, and she had held the position for 16 years. And she asked questions the way a person who had asked them for 16 years and knew which answers mattered does. You identified the threat, she said to Marcus, because of the physical characteristics of the heat walls. Yes, he said. No sensor on the station detected it. The sensors were tuned to detect technology, not biology. The Keth do not use advanced technology to hide. They use their bodies. Their metabolic activity is low at rest. Therefore, an untuned sensor reads them as background noise, but their core temperature is still warm. You have to place a hand on the wall to feel it. Sensors do not have hands. Raishan looked at him directly. And you thought to place a hand on the wall because where I come from, Marcus said, you check the walls. You check everything. It's not a methodology. It's a reflex. She paused. On Earth, she said. On Earth, he said. He had already explained Earth in the morning to the reconnaissance team, but the way Raishan said it told him she wanted to hear it directly, so he described it. He didn't embellish and didn't simplify. He described the gravity, the predators, the bacterial environment, and the weather systems, and the specific quality of 3 million years of evolutionary pressure that produces a species that checks the walls, sleeps lightly, and understands in the sense that creatures understand creatures that were prey before they became predators, and then became both at the same time. Security is something you create every day, constantly exercising attention. And if you stop creating it, it ceases to exist. The room went quiet when he finished. One of the other High Council members, a Cerulean distinguished from Vex by almost everything except golden hands, said, "We classified your world as a forbidden designation, Class 9. I know," Marcus said. "We put it on our hazard maps." "I know that too," he said. "We warned every species under the Consortium's protection to avoid it." "Yes," Marcus said. The Cerulean looked at him. "We thought we were protecting ourselves from your world." "We didn't consider," she said slowly, "that we might have been protecting your world from us, that by staying away, designating it, and avoiding it, we left your species without contact, without information, without—" She stopped. "Without knowledge of the existence of the Keth," Marcus said. "Yes," she said quietly. "Among other things." It hung in the room for a moment. "What would you have done?" Raishan asked. "If you had known? If Earth had been a member of the Consortium and had known about the Keth expansion for 6 years?" Marcus thought about his planet, about what his planet had produced, about every human who had ever stood between something dangerous and someone who couldn't stand between them. "Something sooner than this," he said. "The Keth team contacted them through official Consortium channels on the 3rd day, which required 11 hours of careful diplomatic maneuvering before anyone was ready to be on the line simultaneously, and then 2 more hours of language work before the exchange began." Marcus was not in the room for the first part. He was in the observation lounge when Zara came looking for him, which had become a pattern that had ceased to surprise him. She came with 2 cups of something warm. She had started bringing him something that resembled coffee, which tasted like the philosophical cousin of coffee close enough to appreciate, and she sat next to him and looked at the gas giant for a long time before speaking. "The Keth team confirmed the operation," she said. "They call it a miscalculation." "Generous," Marcus said. "They also asked to speak with you specifically." He looked at her. The 2 under arrest told them. They described what happened. The assault team consisted of 14 trained combat Keth. "You." She stopped, looking for something. "You are 1 human from the table at the end of the room." He drank his coffee. "Cousin, they want to understand." "The team wants to know," she said, "what they didn't account for. You are asking me to talk to them." "The High Council is asking," she said. "I am asking too, but for other reasons." "What are your reasons?" he asked. She paused, doing the sequence of Vathani faces. He had become better at reading her. What was currently moving across her face wasn't complex. It was one thing repeated. The expression that appeared when she said something she had decided to say, rather than something that just appeared. "I have been watching you since your arrival," she said. "This was my assignment, but now—" She paused. "My observation is no longer professional. I wanted you to know that." He looked at her 4 arms and too expressive face and the datapad she wasn't using, and at how she found him in every room since the first morning when she stood next to him in the exhibition hall and said directly, "You walk these corridors since dawn." "I know," he said. "Pause, and I will talk to the Keth team," he said. "And after that, I have some thoughts about what I would like to do next." She looked at him. "You are planning to stay?" It wasn't a question, because she was well versed in that specific attention that reads what is not said and what was not said by Marcus Holt, sitting in the observation lounge above the gas giant, 40 light years from his broken water heater, drinking something that was almost coffee in a galaxy that had only just learned he existed, was quite a lot. "I think the Consortium needs someone who checks the walls," he said. The link to the Keth team lasted 40 minutes. Marcus said almost nothing for the first 30, which was intentional. He listened to the Keth commander, a voice that the chip translator rendered as deep, and measured a voice that clearly gave many orders and received many results. He went through what had been planned and why, and he let the commander speak, because you learn more from listening than from asking. The Keth team had made a set of assumptions about the Consortium that, until 48 hours ago, were absolutely accurate. The Consortium was capable and organized and politically skilled. It was not a military force. It had never fought anything for 400 years of collective existence. Its security was built on deterrence through treaties, wealth, and political consequences, not the ability to actually stop something that decided to move. That assessment was true. The only variable that wasn't in the Keth calculation, the only variable that wasn't in anyone's calculation, was Marcus. "You should not have been there," the Keth commander said, not accusing, but stating. "I know," Marcus said. "The Deathman species," the commander said. "We have your planet in our records. We considered contact 7 years ago. Our assessment was that the risk of escalation was too high." Pause. "Are you an aggressive species?" "Yes," Marcus said. "Unpredictable sometimes," Marcus said. "We are also persistent, adaptive. We have very short memories for what hurt us, and very long memories for what threatened the people we are responsible for. He looked at the communication panel. I think you should know that in the future. Long pause on the other side. In the future, the commander said. You expect there to be a future. I expect you to be smart enough to know that what failed here will fail again, Marcus said, and smart enough to ask what the other path looks like. He leaned forward. The consortium has been trying to speak with you for 6 years. I have been here 3 days, and I am telling you they are serious. They are not strong like you, but they are organized, they are patient, and they have 43 species, and they know every trade route in this sector. He paused. You should speak with them. Really speak. Silence. And if we don't, the commander said, then you will conduct this conversation again, Marcus said. Only this time, the consortium will know what to look for in the walls, and I will be better rested. The silence stretched so long that he thought the channel had disconnected. Then the Keth commander said, You are very confident for someone who was not supposed to be in this room. Usually that's how it is, Marcus said. He called home that evening. His sister answered on the 3rd ring, which was normal, and said, Marcus, why is your face everywhere in the news? The tone she used for situations in which he was at fault, which was usually the case. It's a long story. Did the plumber call? He said. Tell him I'll be delayed. How long? He looked out the window of the observation lounge. The gas giant below slowly and hugely shifted. Its storm was still spinning. A pale green planet of a world that had never heard of him. In a system the name of which he had learned 3 days ago, softly lit by the light of a star that was not his sun. Tell him a few months, Marcus said. Maybe longer. His sister paused for a moment. So you'll be there for a while. Yes, he said. I think so. Are you okay? He thought about the shoulder, about the arm and ribs being treated, and the hours of sleep, and the cousin coffee, and Zara's face doing what it did when he said, I know, and the gas giant spinning beneath him in its patient, enormous path. Yes, he said. I am okay. The revised charter of the consortium, the one that established the Integrated Security Directorate, the first formal defense planning body in 400 years of collective history, was drafted over the next 2 weeks, while Marcus was still on the station. He was consulted on issues regarding threat assessment and physical security protocol. He submitted a written report on the wall-checking methodology, which was officially called Biological Threat Detection, Non-Sensor Approaches, and which he himself turned out to consider the strangest document he had ever written, stranger even than the time he wrote the military report after an incident about a situation he wasn't authorized to describe, which meant the report consisted mostly of redactions. Ole was not removed from his post. He was given additional resources, a larger team, and the kind of institutional support that told Marcus the consortium had decided that blaming a security commander who had never faced such a thing before would be less useful than retaining him and improving what surrounded him. Marcus thought that was the right decision. Vex, whom Marcus had pegged on the first day as the most arrogant representative in the room, submitted a formal proposal to the High Council recommending the expansion of contact with Earth and the beginning of preliminary discussions about membership. The proposal included a passage that the translator chip rendered in clean, careful language, as an admission that the consortium's decision to classify Sol 3 as a dangerous designation and restrict contact was, in Vex's exact words, a failure of imagination disguised as caution. Marcus read it twice. He decided he had underestimated Vex. He didn't tell Vex that. He thought Vex probably knew. On the last night before his planned departure, which wasn't actually a departure, because he had accepted a temporary advisory role that would keep him on the station until the Integrated Security Directorate had its basic structure, and temporary had already developed the specific quality of things that weren't going to remain temporary. Marcus sat in the observation lounge and looked at the gas giant. Zara was next to him. She had been next to him for most of the last week, which wasn't a coincidence, and they had both stopped pretending it was. When the letter arrived, she said, inviting a human, they argued for 2 weeks. Some members of the council thought it was too strange. A Class 9 species in a diplomatic setting. Others thought it was interesting. A few people thought it was amusing. She paused. It passed by a margin of 7 votes. 7, he said. If 4 more council members had voted against it, you wouldn't have received an invitation. He thought about that. About the water heater bill. About the violet paper. About Tuesday. If 4 more had voted against it, he said, you would still have 16 Keth in your walls right now? Yes, she said. I have thought about that a lot this week. He looked at the planet below, at the storm that was still spinning, that would likely still be spinning when they were both gone from this particular conversation. It didn't know about the Keth or the consortium or the 7 votes. It didn't know any of that. It just kept spinning, as big things do. What changes now? Zara asked. He thought about it honestly, as he thought about things when they actually mattered, and he wasn't going to cheat himself by giving a quick answer. Everything, he said slowly. The consortium will build what it should have built before. The Keth will recalibrate. Other species that have been watching from the sidelines will recalibrate. Earth. He stopped. Earth will know that the rest of the galaxy exists and has known about us for a long time. That is a conversation we will need to have back home, and it will be complex. Are you ready for the complex? Zara asked. He almost smiled. I grew up on a Class 9 planet in an assassin world, he said. Complex is my norm. She looked at him. The expression on her face was the only steady one, the one that didn't cycle. It didn't act, didn't go through sequences of cautious Vithani emotional manifestations. It just was there, uncomplicated and clear. He knew what it meant, had known for days. The gas giant spun below, enormous and patient, and the station's night cycle fell into the silence of its deep lavender color. And somewhere down the hall, the first working meeting of the Integrated Security Directorate was beginning. And 2 Keth were sitting in a security cell that wasn't going to hold them forever. And 43 species were in the process of understanding something important about the world they lived in. Marcus sat with his almost coffee and his bandaged arm and his slowly improving shoulder and looked at the stars that were not his stars, over a planet that was not his planet, in a galaxy that didn't know his name 3 weeks ago. He thought the invitation had been a joke. He thought none of it was funny anymore. He thought, good, he was exactly where he was supposed to be.